I was thinking about this the other day. When we buy a new piece of furniture, like from IKEA or something, there's this really comforting expectation of precision.
Oh, definitely. It's engineered to be perfect.
Right. Like you open the box, you pull out the manual, and you know with absolute certainty that, tab A is going to slide perfectly into slot B. It's a completely binary system.
Yeah, it either fits together exactly as the diagram dictates or it doesn't.
Exactly. And if it doesn't, you just pack it back up and return it. We find that kind of guaranteed visible alignment just, well, incredibly soothing.
Well, yeah, because human beings fundamentally crave categorized, predictable structures, right?
Yeah.
When things fit perfectly, it lowers our cognitive load.
Makes life easier.
Exactly. We don't have to guess or negotiate. We just follow the instructions on the page. But the moment you step away from flat pack furniture and into the realm of human relationships,
Where things get incredibly messy.
right, specifically that highly volatile moment when two people decide to pack up their independent lives and move in together, suddenly that instruction manual becomes completely obsolete.
Which brings us to our topic today.
Yeah.
Welcome to this deep dive, by the way. We are so glad you were here with us. We have a really fascinating, wildly vulnerable source to unpack today.
It's a great one.
It really is. It's an anonymous blog post I came across recently. It was excerpted from a much broader discussion titled The Calculus of Desire in Modern Partnerships.
I love that title, actually. The Calculus of Desire.
Right. It sounds very clinical, but the post itself lays bare a compatibility landscape that is anything but clean and engineered. It is, frankly, completely murky.
It's just raw human experience.
Exactly. We're looking at a woman writing into the void of the internet, essentially stripping away the performance of having this, perfect relationship. And she's asking a question that honestly haunts a staggering number of couples.
Oh, absolutely. It's way more common than people want to admit.
Yeah. So our mission today for this deep dive is to explore this. She is staring down the sudden, jarring realization of mismatched physical desires right after moving in with her boyfriend.
And she's wondering if this discrepancy can fundamentally undermine a long-term partnership.
Right. And I want you, listening to this right now, to just think about times you've maybe felt out of sync with a partner or a loved one, and think about how societal expectations can totally warp our view of what a normal relationship looks like.
Because the raw honesty of these anonymous forums, it provides this fascinating window into the mechanics of what actually happens behind closed doors.
When you don't have to pretend for Instagram.
Exactly. When you remove that pressure to present a curated highlight reel to your friends and family, you get the unvarnished truth about the growing pains of real intimacy.
Yeah, and what this author is navigating, it's not a story of a relationship inevitably falling apart.
No, not at all.
It's an archetypal story of a relationship being forced to grow up very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. To really understand the pressures operating on this couple, I think we have to look at the architectural framework of their relationship up to this point.
The timeline, right.
Right, because the baseline context changes everything about how this conflict is going to be processed by both of them.
So she gives us that context right up front in the post. She writes that she and her boyfriend have been dating for 6 months.
Just 6 months.
Right. And just 1 month ago, so month 5, they made the massive leap to move in together.
Wow.
Yeah. She describes this initial month of cohabitation as a, quote, roller coaster of emotions, mostly positive.
Mostly positive is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
For sure. She mentions they've been discovering new aspects of each other daily. And crucially, she asserts that despite this turbulence, the relationship is, in her words, pretty solid, built on a strong foundation of love and mutual respect.
Well, let's unpack that timeline first, because that phrase, roller coaster of emotions, it is the perfect clinical descriptor for the first 30 days of shared domestic space.
It's chaotic.
Highly chaotic. When two people are merely dating, even if they spend a significant amount of time at one another's apartments, there is always a psychological retreat available.
You can just go home.
Exactly. You have your own sanctuary, your own unobserved space where you can just be a mess if you want to.
Yeah, you don't have to perform.
Right. But the moment a lease is signed or, boxes are unpacked, that safety net evaporates completely. The cognitive load just skyrockets.
You're negotiating everything.
You are suddenly forced to constantly negotiate shared space, shared routines, and deeply ingrained personal habits.
But okay, I really have to point out the glaring variable here. 6 months? I mean, they moved in together after dating for only 6 months.
Yeah,
That's a reckless acceleration, isn't it?
it is incredibly fast.
It's like taking a relationship that is fundamentally still operating in the honeymoon phase and just immediately subjecting it to a domestic stress test.
That's exactly what it is.
You are colliding the dizzying heights of new love with the incredibly mundane reality of, like, deciding who buys the toilet paper or whose turn it is to do the dishes.
Yeah, it forces a collision between two very different biological and psychological states.
What do you mean by biological stress?
Well, from a neurobiological perspective, the first 6 months of a relationship are defined by limerence.
Limerence. Okay, break that down for us.
It's that intense, euphoric infatuation phase. During limerence, the brain is essentially bathed in dopamine and oxytocin.
The feel-good chemicals.
Right. And interestingly, serotonin levels actually drop, which mimics the neural activity of obsessive-compulsive behavior.
Oh, wow. So you're literally obsessed with the person.
You are biologically programmed to obsess over your partner. You're programmed to overlook their flaws and to prioritize physical and emotional connection above literally everything else.
So you're essentially operating under the influence of your own neurochemistry.
Precisely. The brain is optimizing for bonding, but, and this is the kicker, the domestic environment optimizes for survival and routine.
Right. The rent is due, the trash needs to go out.
Exactly. So when they collapse that timeline by moving in at month 6, they are bringing all those mundane stressors of cohabitation, paying bills, doing dishes, managing daily fatigue, right into the middle of this chemically altered state.
The friction is just inevitable at that point.
Totally inevitable. You are discovering the unpolished versions of each other way sooner than you normally would. You see how your partner reacts to a bad day at work when there's no audience to perform for.
Which, honestly, makes her assertion that their relationship is pretty solid and built on mutual respect the absolute linchpin of this entire scenario.
Oh, it's the only thing saving them right now.
Right. Because if they didn't have that shared value system already locked in, the stress of this transition and the physical mismatch they are about to face would instantly fracture the relationship.
Yeah, that underlying respect, it acts as a shock absorber. When the euphoric chemicals of the limerent phase begin their inevitable natural decline, because nobody can sustain that forever.
You'd never get any work done.
Right, you'd never sleep. But when that fades, what remains is the architecture of the partnership. The capacity to handle conflict with kindness, the baseline respect for one another's humanity.
Those are the elements that determine whether an emerging conflict becomes a matter of thoughtful negotiation or just a catastrophic failure.
And they seem to have established that bedrock early on, which provides the psychological safety required for her to even acknowledge the upcoming challenge.
But, and here's where the plot thickens, that bedrock is immediately put to the test by the physical reality of their living situation. This is where the beautifully built foundation starts experiencing some pretty serious tremors.
The central conflict of the post.
Exactly. The author realizes that when it comes to physical intimacy, they are, in her words, slightly out of sync.
Just slight.
Yeah, though it clearly feels like a big deal to her. She points out that her boyfriend is significantly more interested in physical intimacy than she is. And she follows that up with a sentence that is arguably the most important distinction in the entire post. She says, "It's not that I don't enjoy it, but my desire doesn't match up with his."
I'm so glad she included that sentence, because that distinction really dismantles one of the most pervasive and honestly toxic myths that society holds about human sexuality.
The idea that it's all or nothing.
Yes. We are culturally conditioned to view libido as a binary switch. It is either completely powered on or it is entirely powered off.
Right, like society paints it as one person wants it constantly and the other person absolutely hates it.
Exactly. The media, and even our own internal anxieties, often frame a desired discrepancy as the ravenous partner versus the frigid partner.
Which is such an adversarial dynamic before the conversation even starts.
It's terrible. And that adversarial dynamic is almost never grounded in reality. Human desire operates on a highly nuanced, fluctuating dial, not a switch.
So it turns up and down based on circumstances.
Exactly. The author enjoys physical intimacy. She loves her boyfriend. She is attracted to him. But her frequency dial is currently resting at a lower setting than his.
Which is completely normal, right?
In the landscape of long-term partnerships, this dynamic is incredibly common. Professional therapists emphasize this all the time. Almost every enduring relationship features a higher desire partner and a lower desire partner.
I feel like we don't talk about that enough.
We really don't. And it is crucial to recognize that those roles are not static. They frequently swap back and forth over the years as life circumstances evolve.
Well, let's talk about those life circumstances because that's exactly what I want to zero in on here. She provides a massive piece of evidence regarding what is turning her dial down.
The fatigue.
Yes. She specifically notes that she turns down his advances when she has had a, quote, long, exhausting day.
Yeah, that's cute.
It really begs the question, is this fundamentally a libido mismatch? Or is it actually an energy mismatch?
Oh, that's a brilliant distinction.
Right. Because we have to factor in the sheer physiological toll of modern life. Between commuting, navigating a career, carrying the mental load of endless emails, and then transitioning into the domestic labor of cooking and cleaning, the body just becomes depleted.
You're running on empty.
Yeah. So when a partner initiates intimacy at the end of that cycle, it's not a lack of love that causes the rejection. It's literally a lack of physical bandwidth.
Yeah.
It's like someone offering you your favorite slice of cake right after you've just run a marathon.
That is a perfect analogy.
You love the cake is great, but right now you just desperately need to sleep.
The distinction between psychological desire and physiological bandwidth is so profound. I mean, you can deeply desire connection with your partner, but your nervous system simply cannot facilitate the energy required for physical intimacy in that moment.
Because it takes energy.
It takes a ton of energy. And when couples transition from dating to living together, the entire environmental context for intimacy shifts.
Right, because dates are scheduled events. When you don't live together, you have days to anticipate seeing each other. You conserve energy for it.
You get ready, you listen to music on the drive over.
Exactly. You mentally transition from work mode to romance mode. The interaction is highly curated.
The proximity is intentional and energetic, but cohabitation removes that buffer zone completely.
You're just always there.
Right. The physical proximity becomes constant 24/7, but the energetic availability does not scale with it.
That is so true.
Your partner isn't arriving at a scheduled time looking their best. They are simply sitting on the couch while you are trying to decompress from a draining afternoon. The expectation that moving in together will result in boundless, spontaneous intimacy ignores the reality that spontaneous desire thrives on novelty and excess energy.
And cohabitation naturally diminishes both of those things.
Exactly.
Which perfectly explains why the author feels so trapped by her exhaustion. And let's look at the emotional toll this dynamic takes, because the physical exhaustion very quickly morphs into a deeply psychological burden.
The guilt.
The guilt is huge. When the body says no, the brain immediately starts generating guilt. She writes that she feels incredibly guilty when she turns him down.
Yeah, you can really feel her anxiety in the text.
You really can. She points to his behavior, noting that his persistence makes her feel like she's letting him down. She explicitly says, I don't want him to think I'm not attracted to him because that's definitely not the case.
The psychology of guilt within a partnership is so complex. It often stems from this unspoken, deeply ingrained cultural contract that equates being a good partner with being physically available.
Like it's your job.
Right. And when a person reaches their physical limit and has to enforce a boundary by saying no, it feels like a violation of that internalized contract.
Yeah.
The guilt she is articulating is the intense friction between her physiological reality, her sheer exhaustion, and her psychological desire to be a pleasing, supportive partner.
See, I interpret her guilt as a really potent symptom of her emotional investment.
How so?
Well, if she were indifferent to him, or if she was checking out of the relationship, she wouldn't agonize over letting him down.
That's true.
She would simply say no, roll over, and go to sleep without a second thought. The fact that she is carrying this guilt and analyzing it to the point of writing a public plea for advice on the internet proves how deeply she cares about protecting his ego.
It is a misguided, agonizing expression of love. She is taking on the total responsibility for his emotional regulation.
Which is exhausting in itself.
Absolutely. She is terrified that her physical boundary will be misinterpreted as an emotional rejection, which she knows triggers his insecurities. But we also have to analyze the catalyst for her guilt, which is his persistence.
Right, she mentions he is persistent.
The word persistent highlights a really dangerous blur between a pursuit and pressure.
I can see how in his mind he might view his persistence as a romantic gesture. He might believe he is clearly communicating his attraction and validating her desirability. Like, he thinks he's being persistent in his love.
And that highlights the massive gap in their communication. For the higher desire partner, initiating is often an attempt to create connection and relieve their own stress.
Oh, I want to feel close.
Exactly. But for the lower desire, exhausted partner, persistent pursuit registers on the nervous system as a demand.
Because it's another task.
Right. When a person is already drained, having to repeatedly enforce a boundary requires an expenditure of energy they simply do not possess. It shifts the dynamic from an invitation to an obligation.
And then resentment builds.
Exactly. The higher desire partner eventually feels rejected and unwanted because they keep trying, while the lower desire partner feels hunted, inadequate, and completely smothered. It creates this awful feedback loop of mutual resentment.
But I do want to point out that the author is utilizing a specific internal strategy to combat that loop, which I think shows a ton of self-awareness.
Yes, she is.
She is actively attempting to sever the link between physical exhaustion and emotional rejection. She continually reassures herself, and presumably tries to reassure him, that her attraction remains completely intact despite her fatigue.
That's a great cognitive reframe.
It is. But the challenge is translating that internal reassurance into an external reality that he can actually feel. Because words only go so far, right?
Absolutely.
So how do couples practically bridge that gap? If one partner is having a long, exhausting day, how do they maintain a sense of physical connection without it feeling like a demand for performance?
Well, this is where therapeutic interventions focus heavily on establishing daily habits of what we call non-demand touch.
Non-demand touch. Okay, explain that.
Non-demand touch is physical affection that carries an explicit, understood boundary that it will not escalate into sexual intimacy.
Oh, I love that.
It is a way to bridge the gap in physical connection, providing that vital reassurance to the higher desire partner without requiring the exhausted partner to drain their remaining reserves.
So it removes the hidden agenda. It's affection without a requested outcome.
Exactly. It bypasses the threat response in the exhausted partner's nervous system.
Because if every time they touch, the lower desire partner assumes it's a prelude to a demand they can't meet, they're going to start avoiding all physical contact.
Completely. They will stop cuddling on the couch. They will pull away from a lingering kiss because they are actively trying to prevent the escalation.
They're building a fortress.
Exactly. By establishing non-demand touch-like, for example, a simple 20-second hug when returning home.
Just 20 seconds.
Yeah, just 20 seconds neurobiologically lowers blood pressure and triggers oxytocin release. It's powerful. So holding hands, resting a head on a shoulder, these micro moments of connection reassure the higher desire partner of their desirability while completely honoring the lower desire partner's energy limits.
That concept completely reframes how physical affection can function in a home. It's so practical. But it requires the couple to actually talk about it and agree on those boundaries.
We have to communicate the rules of engagement, yeah.
And this author did try to address the issue directly. She writes, "We've talked about it. He's always kind and understanding."
Which is great.
It is great. Yet, despite having what seems like a really successful, empathetic conversation, she admits she still can't shake the feeling that they are fundamentally out of sync.
Which is so frustrating for couples.
It brings us to a phenomenon that is maddening. I call it the communication paradox.
Oh, the communication paradox. I like that.
Right. It's this realization that discussing a problem does not inherently resolve the physical reality of the problem.
And operate under this societal illusion that communication is a magic panacea.
Yes. We are told that if we just use our I statements and validate each other's feelings and keep our tones perfectly level, the conflict will just evaporate into thin air.
But it doesn't work like that.
No.
Yeah.
Communication is like looking at the blueprint of a house together. You can spread the blueprint out on the dining table, analyze it calmly, and both agree completely that the stairs are broken. But intellectually agreeing that the stairs are broken doesn't magically build new stairs. You still have to do the physical, messy labor of fixing them.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Knowing why she is exhausted doesn't make her any less exhausted.
Yeah.
And him understanding her fatigue doesn't immediately shut off his biological desire for intimacy.
Exactly. The intellectual understanding does not rewrite their physiological states. His kindness and understanding are vital, but they don't erase her lingering feelings of inadequacy.
So what do they do?
Well, If we deconstruct her approach, she is actually modeling an incredibly healthy framework for navigating this tension. Even though she feels unsatisfied with the immediate lack of resolution, her method for discussing needs safely provides a really clear roadmap for other couples. We can extract 3 distinct, highly effective steps from her narrative.
Okay, let's break those down. Step 1 seems to be her willingness to initiate the conversation openly.
Yes, exactly.
She didn't rely on passive-aggressive sighing, and she didn't just continuously pull away and leave him to guess why she was being distant. She brought the discrepancy right into the light.
That alone is huge. It bypasses the typical freeze response many couples fall into when dealing with sexual shame or perceived rejection.
Right, so step 1, initiate openly.
Open initiation is critical because it removes the ambiguity that breeds anxiety.
And step 2.
Step 2 is entirely dependent on his reaction, which she notes was kind and understanding. He approached the vulnerability with kindness.
Which is harder than it sounds.
It is. When a partner exposes a perceived inadequacy-like feeling, unable to meet physical needs, the immediate instinct for many people is defensiveness.
Right, he could have easily made it about himself. Why don't you want me?
Exactly. If he had reacted with frustration or felt his ego was under attack, her amygdala would have triggered a fight-or-flight response.
And the conversation would have derailed instantly.
The conversation would have devolved into an argument about tone rather than intimacy. His kindness essentially downregulated her nervous system, making it psychologically safe for her to continue being honest.
I love that. So step 2, approach with kindness, which leads to step 3, which is the exact phase they are currently wrestling with. It's the realization that this isn't a problem to be fixed overnight, but rather an ongoing learning process.
Step 3 is focusing on the learning process rather than demanding an immediate static fix. Healthy communication in a long-term partnership isn't about perfectly aligning your desires so that there is no difference between you.
Because that's impossible.
Right. It is about creating an environment where it is safe for that difference to exist.
That is a massive paradigm shift. I think
Sure.
we usually assume the goal of compromise is a perfect 50-50 split, where both people change their fundamental nature just enough to make things perfectly smooth.
Which just leads to 2 people pretending to be someone they aren't.
Right. But you're saying the goal is learning to sit in the discomfort of the discrepancy.
That is exactly what true relational maturity is. It's accepting that you have different libidos or wildly fluctuating energy levels and learning how to tolerate the tension of that reality without panicking.
Without blowing up the whole relationship.
Exactly. The space between what he wants and what she is capable of giving on a random Tuesday night is not a failure of the relationship. That tension is the crucible where deep emotional maturity and real patience are forged.
So they shouldn't be freaking out.
Professional therapists frequently note that how a couple navigates their first major unfixable discrepancy, how they handle a problem that literally cannot be solved with a single conversation, is the truest predictor of their long-term viability.
So they aren't failing at all. They're transitioning out of the artificial ease of the honeymoon phase and doing the heavy lifting of building a resilient adult partnership.
Precisely.
And part of that heavy lifting is recognizing the external pressures that are making them feel like they are failing.
The societal noise.
Exactly. The author of the post does something remarkable here. She stops analyzing her own living room and pans out to look at the broader cultural narrative. She questions what she calls the, quote, universally accepted notion that sex is crucial.
She's getting philosophical.
She is. She asks the internet, is it really a make-or-break factor? Can't a loving relationship thrive without constantly focusing on this particular aspect?
I love that she does this. She is actively deconstructing the societal narratives she has internalized, because the cultural script we are handed heavily dictates our expectations of normalcy.
Think about the media we consume. The movies, the television shows, the endless stream of articles on our feeds, they relentlessly push a narrative that if a couple isn't constantly swinging from the chandeliers, their relationship is dying.
It's everywhere.
It is. The trope of the sexless, loveless marriage is used as the ultimate punchline, or the inciting tragedy of every suburban drama. This creates an absurd, completely unfair pressure on couples. It weaponizes natural fluctuations in desire.
It creates a highlight reel that people compare their unedited lives against.
Yes.
When media portrays physical passion as the singular, overriding metric of a relationship's health, it deeply distorts reality. The danger of this universally accepted notion is that it drastically devalues all the other profound forms of emotional and practical intimacy that actually sustain a life together.
It makes us blind to the good stuff.
Exactly. So when she asks if a relationship can thrive without a constant focus on physical intimacy, the consensus from relationship professionals is an unequivocal yes.
This brings up the concept of the calculus of desire.
Right, from the title of the broader discussion.
Yeah. How do couples weigh physical intimacy against everything else that makes a partnership functional and joyful? What are the other glues holding a relationship together?
Because physical desire is incredibly volatile.
So volatile. It is highly susceptible to stress, aging, illness, hormonal shifts,
Yeah.
and just sheer exhaustion. If a partnership is built exclusively on that foundation, it is essentially built on a fault line. It's going to crack.
The calculus involves recognizing the immense weight of other forms of connection.
Like what?
Well, there is intellectual intimacy, the capacity to debate, to dream, to problem solve together.
Which is huge when you're managing a household.
Right. There is financial partnership and the shared rhythm of domestic life. There is the profound, quiet emotional safety of knowing someone will care for you when you are vulnerable or sick.
The comfort of being known.
Exactly. These elements, the mutual respect and shared values she highlighted at the very beginning of her post, they form the true bedrock of lasting commitment. When the relationship is anchored by shared values, it can easily absorb the natural ebb and flow of sexual frequency.
And that perspective is vital when you consider how evolving desire impacts relationships over the span of decades. Because remember, they are only at month 7 of knowing each other.
They're barely out of the starting gate.
Exactly. Imagine year 7 or year 20. How do couples maintain a deep bond as physical appetites inevitably shift and change over the long term?
They survive by allowing their definition of intimacy to remain completely fluid. When professional therapists analyze sexual compatibility in partnerships spanning decades, they observe something really interesting.
What's that?
Successful couples do not expect their sex life at year 10 to mirror year 1.
That seems like a recipe for disappointment anyway.
It is.
Yeah.
Instead, they focus on finding shared joy beyond physical touch. They cultivate shared intellectual pursuits, they protect time for deep conversation, and they prioritize humor.
Oh, laughing together is the best.
Shared laughter is an incredibly potent biological bonding agent. It releases a cascade of endorphins that promote trust and affection.
It makes you feel like you're on the same team.
Right. They allow their physical connection to evolve into something that might occur less frequently, but is perhaps more profoundly trusting and vulnerable when it does occur.
So, to answer her fear directly, a relationship can absolutely remain strong and even deepen if partners' libidos don't perfectly align.
Provided there is open communication, of course.
Right. A mutual refusal to harbor resentment and a commitment to honoring both partners' boundaries, which actually transitions beautifully into the final section of her post, where we witness a remarkable psychological shift.
It really is a shift.
She actively moves away from panic and toward resolution. She writes, "I'm hopeful this isn't something that will drive us apart. In fact, I'm determined for it not to."
That's a powerful statement.
It is. She concludes that their energy should be focused on, quote, understanding and compromising rather than stressing over the differences.
The linguistic shift there, from anxiety-laden questioning to sheer determination, is a textbook demonstration of emotional resilience.
It's incredible to watch in real time. I mean, she begins the post sounding overwhelmed by guilt and fear, genuinely questioning if the relationship is doomed by this discrepancy.
She was in a full threat state.
Yeah. But by the end, she is using words like nurturing, understanding, and compromise. It's as if the very act of linearizing her panic by writing it down allowed her to regulate her own nervous system.
Journaling does that, or blogging in this case.
By organizing her thoughts, she reclaimed her agency. She realized that burning energy on stressing over the difference was completely futile and pivoted to collaborative problem solving.
She moved from a threat state to a collaborative state. But the application of understanding and compromising requires intentional strategy.
It can't just be a nice thought.
Right. Practical compromise in this scenario means both partners stretching slightly outside their default comfort zones while rigorously protecting their core boundaries.
So what does that practical compromise actually look like, neurobiologically and behaviorally? For the higher desire partner, I imagine it involves decoupling his ego from her physical availability.
Exactly. For him, compromise means learning to read the environmental cues.
paying attention to her state.
It's recognizing the physiological signs of her long, exhausting day and actively choosing to offer that non-demand touch we talked about instead of initiating a sexual encounter that risks making her feel pressured.
So he has to regulate his own feelings.
He has to self-soothe his rejection sensitivity and understand that her need for sleep is not an indictment of his desirability. It's just fatigue.
And what does her side of the compromise entail? Because she can't just permanently retreat into exhaustion, or the connection really will wither.
No, she can't. Her compromise involves proactive energy management.
Energy management, okay.
It means finding intentional pockets of time where she can marshal her resources to be fully present for intimacy.
Scheduling it, basically.
Essentially, yes. If the daily grind of the work week depletes her responsive desire, perhaps Saturday mornings become protected, intentional time for connection.
When she's actually rested.
Right. Furthermore, compromise means shifting from reactive rejection to proactive reassurance.
What's the difference?
Instead of just saying no in the moment, which feels like a door slamming shut, she can say, my body is completely drained tonight, but I want to connect with you tomorrow when I can be fully present.
Oh, that's so much better.
That simple phrasing validates his desire, reinforces her attraction, and sets a clear, manageable expectation that completely removes the ambiguity.
She calls it an ongoing learning process. And her desire to keep nurturing the relationship through this friction shows immense emotional endurance.
It really does.
Facing a fundamental difference in needs, sitting in the heavy guilt, communicating through the awkwardness, and actively choosing to stay and construct a compromise rather than fleeing. I mean, this is the very definition of how long-term bonding evolves.
It's the antithesis of the easy, chemically induced limerence of the first 6 months.
Exactly. This is the deliberate architectural work of building a partnership capable of withstanding the weight of a lifetime.
It is the shift from a relationship that happens to you to a relationship that you actively build.
Wow, we've covered a massive amount of psychological ground today.
We really have.
We started with a highly vulnerable snapshot of a couple colliding the euphoric honeymoon phase with the gritty reality of a new lease and shared domestic space.
It was a dangerous collision.
We deconstructed the toxic binary myth of libido, illuminating how spontaneous desire is fundamentally altered by the exhaustion of a daily grind and the shift from curated dates to constant proximity.
We analyzed the profound difference between intellectual communication and physiological reality.
The communication paradox.
Right. And mapping out how the persistence of a higher desire partner can trigger a threat response, and how couples can utilize non-demand touch to safely bridge that gap.
And we challenged the societal highlight reel that falsely equates sexual frequency with relationship health. We explored how shared values, mutual respect, and emotional maturity allow a couple to tolerate the tension of their differences without panicking.
Which is the ultimate goal.
So, to you, the listener, if you are listening to this and you have ever felt out of sync in your own life, whether it's about intimacy or the division of labor or just the exhausting rhythm of sharing a life with another human being, please understand that you are not failing.
You're really not.
You are simply in the negotiation phase of building something real. It's supposed to be complex. It's supposed to be messy.
The friction is the work of love.
The friction is the work of love. I love that.
Yeah.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to explore on your own.
Okay, let's hear it.
The blogger ended her post by asking a massive question. Do you think sex is the ultimate glue in a relationship?
A huge question.
We've discussed what that glue might be instead. The mutual respect, the shared humor, the intellectual alignment. But, perhaps the true glue isn't a specific action or a feeling or a perfectly aligned libido.
What is it then?
Perhaps the ultimate glue in any long-term partnership is simply a partner's willingness to sit down at the table, look at the messy, unengineered reality of the situation, lean into the vulnerability, ask the incredibly uncomfortable questions, and commit to figuring it out together.
Wow.
Because unlike that flat-pack furniture we talked about at the start, there are no perfectly aligned slots and tabs in human connection. There is just the two of you deciding day after day that the confusing, murky work of building a life together is profoundly worth it.
The willingness to build without a manual.
Precisely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.